And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. This is Election Day, Bill. Election Day. Hope you voted.
A week ago.
Bill doesn't leave anything to the last minute, right?
Well, I'm not saying that. I thought I was going to be in Charlotte today. So I went ahead and took advantage of early voting. But as you can probably tell, my voice is a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Hoarse, to say the least. So I came home. That's why I'm home. Anyway, so yes, I sound different. It's not your monitors. It's not your audio. It's not your earbuds, whatever. It's my voice, So I may have to step off and cough and sneeze and hack, and I'm going to be sipping water. So just letting everybody know what's going on.
Well, good morning to Darlene, Linda, Tyson, Beth, Chezzy, Alan, all the people that are coming in early. We're so glad that you could join us on midterm elections. I hope everybody went out and voted. I know in California, I voted. I was the 7th in line today when the polls opened. And I look at that as 7, meaning completeness, as in the Bible. So I'm gonna take that as a good sign that California, may do some good things today, and instead of voting for Democrats today.
Well, it's about time that California started doing some good things, because the rest of us are kind of tired of carrying you on our back. Just playing.
Looks like a little bit longer you're going to be doing that. Hello to Bethany and Ann. I'll say Bethany so we won't get confused with the other Beth is in the room as well.
Right.
And Paula, good to see everybody. How's voting? Let's talk a little bit to everybody. How's voting going in your area? What's happening? What are you seeing? I know that Anne's in the UK, so she's not going to be able to tell us.
Yeah, that'd be really unique perspective.
Early voting. So how are things going, anybody? Marlene said, get well soon, Bill.
Thank you very much, Marlene.
That's the only thing I could read that Marlene writes. I don't have to read it first to make sure that.
Yeah, I have to tell this story. I was in South Florida this weekend, and there was some folks that they come on and watch the replay of our show, and they said they were asking this question, that question, asking about you, how we got to meet one another, all those kinds of things. And then this one lady, she says, "Tell me about Marlene."
Oh my gosh!
So Marlene, you're famous, Marlene.
That's pretty cool, Marlene. And she didn't even ask for the fame, and she's famous anyway. That's really great.
Yeah, she's famous.
Anne said, "I wish I could vote." Anne from the UK.
Well, you can, Anne. Just come on over, and
everybody else does. Anne, why not you?
Everyone else does. Come on over, Anne.
Darlene said, very smooth and pain-free early this morning, a country town. That's really good. I saw that there were long lines in Indiana and Ohio voting today. So hopefully that's a good sign with people coming in those states. I did have someone write their dog in because there was no Republican. Well, that happened in California. We had Senator Dianne Feinstein against Kevin DeLeon, both Democrats, because in California it's the top 2 vote getters. We also had for lieutenant governor 2 Democrats. I voted. This is the first time in my life that I had to vote for a Democrat today, and I voted because I didn't want to leave it blank. Because if you leave it blank and somebody else comes in and votes and they get the vote, and you don't cancel their vote out. So I wanted to make sure that I could at least cancel a vote out for Kevin DeLeon, who is, in my opinion, a bigger threat to the Trump administration over the long run. So sometimes you have to hold your nose and just do it, so. Well,
I'll try to forgive you.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to forgive myself. It's been a really difficult morning. Now, Jean said she voted red, so that's good. Glad to hear it.
And that's important because Jean's in Florida. So.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Jean, were there long lines in Florida? What were you seeing in Florida?
Unless she has moved, she lives in Volusia County, Florida. Of course, it was in Volusia County, Florida, where that one Republican headquarters got shot up.
Yep.
That was in South Daytona, I think. So Western side of Volusia County is probably a little bit more red than the other side, but that's I don't know. I haven't lived there in 20 some odd years, so things may have changed. But Gene
Wow.
can fill us in.
Jonathan says, "Hello, Bill and Susan. Today is a day if I began to speak in tongues again."
I think it's referring back
Okay.
to a prior conversation. So,
Okay. All right. Gotcha. No, I'm in
oh,
Georgia now.
she's in Georgia. Okay, well, that's still critical. Good. Um, I didn't know you were in Georgia, Gene. Anyway,
Wow.
forget everything I just said about Florida.
Well, I heard some things going on in different precincts today. For example, in a precinct in Detroit, there were some people who were voters were turned away because their voting machines were missing. Kind of hard
Where,
to vote when you don't
where,
have
where was that?
in Detroit, a precinct in Detroit.
There's a lot of things missing in Detroit.
Well, apparently they can't find their voting machines either. So Marlene said voting red here in Pasco County, Florida. That's what's wrong with me.
Well,
Okay. We'll forgive you for that too. I was having a conversation with Marlene earlier today. We were talking about so many things that are going on in Florida. Florida has really gotten itself into the news lately, and not for good things. And I said, it's starting to sound worse in California. I don't get what's going on in Florida.
well, um, I haven't lived there in 20 years, so perhaps it's not fair for me to say, but I will anyway. I mean, Florida is a magnet for people from all these other states, particularly the Northeast. And so not only do they bring their um, money, but they sometimes bring their problems, and sometimes they bring, a lot of times they bring their politics. So, Florida is, it's the southernmost state, but it's not it's not what you would consider traditionally Southern as far as conservative views, although, it depends on what part of Florida you're in. So, North Florida, more conservative. The farther south you go, less conservative. But it's just like any other state, even California. You get out of the populated, areas, they tend to be more conservative. They tend to be more, my view, common sense. You go into the bigger metropolitan areas, Orlando, Tampa, St. Pete, Miami, all those areas, they just tend to be more liberal. And there's just so many people over the last few decades that have gone to Florida. This is what you end up with. So there's a lot of unsettling trends, current in Florida now.
Yeah, in California, the further away you get from the coast, if you go inland, then you get into the conservative areas where all the conservatives live. And we, as you know, or you may remember, we had on our ballot at one point a vote to separate the state in California, to divide it into different separate states. And they got that stopped. The Democrats got that stopped, and that was taken off of the ballot. So we weren't allowed to vote to divide our state because they want to control it all. So
Well, they do.
yeah, they do. Marlene said that Pasco is very deep red, and Darlene said they're all influenced by liberal media too. Seeking to change the tide in Washington, seeking the change in the tide in Washington today, Linda said.
Well, you
Hope
go, Linda.
you go, Linda. You'll probably be the only Republican there voting, right? Washington, unfortunately, is pretty blue, but we can only hope, right?
Well, same thing in Washington, as I understand it. You know, Seattle, Tacoma, yeah, deep blue. Farther east you go in Washington, it's more conservative. I've spent a lot of time out in like uh, Spokane area, that region, and they're just folks like us. It's all them city folks. It's something about living in those cities that gets turns people liberal. I don't know what it is.
Messes up the mind. Now, Darlene, I believe it was saying, someone said that. Did you see the rallies last night? The rallies were pretty incredible. There were rallies in Indiana, Ohio, and also in Missouri last night with Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity came on the stage to join President Trump. President Trump keeps saying there's something going on. I mean, when you've got 60,000 people there to watch him and people waiting outside, I'd say there is something going on.
Well, Sunday night I think he went to Macon, Georgia. And when he left Macon, Georgia, he came to Chattanooga. And I was out of town, but Beth, my wife, and Alan and Allison all went to the rally. And there were over 11,000 people. It was packed to the, capacity. There were 11,000 people in the arena. And there were thousands. I don't know how many, but there were many thousands outside. And I think Alan told me that they had a big jumbotron out where people could watch. And and it was even before it was all said and done, it was raining. People were watching this in the rain. So boy, that seems to be everywhere he goes, you get this kind of enthusiasm. Whether that converts into votes, we'll have to wait and see today. But
Well,
it's kind of hard for me to imagine it doesn't.
I know. Well, especially when you have people who are standing outside in the rain. Bethany said over 13,000 in and many outside. If you're standing out there in the rain, you could be watching it from home. You don't have to stand out there in the rain. It's like people kind of want to just be there and feel
Yeah,
everything.
right.
Now, I had a woman that comes in here. She's not in here today because she's working the polls, but she's working the polls for Ted Cruz in Texas. And she was telling me a story the other day that there was a man that came into the area where Ted Cruz was, and he had on a lapel pin, with the flag, and it had a star in the middle of it. And she said, "What's that with the star there? I haven't seen that before." And he said, "I don't know if he was retired Secret Service. I believe that's what she said he was." And she said that the man had told her that he had gone to the White House to meet the president at one point. And he said, I'm a tough guy. He said, but when I went into the White House and I met the president, he said I felt the power of the Holy Spirit in the White House
Hmm.
with the president. Now that brought chills for me. And he said he said I just kind of I was overwhelmed. So that was good to know. And I, again, we've talked about this. I don't even think the president is aware of some of these things and how much God has his hand on him. I really don't know that he's aware of it. But it's nice to hear stories of other people, especially people like, tough guys in the Secret Service who have met the president and feel that way. And I think a lot of people, they understand that there's something going on with this man, that he loves the country, and he wants to do what's best for the country. Again, this man doesn't have to do this. He never had to do this. But I
Yeah.
want to I want to tell you, Bill, I saw a video from him from years ago, probably back in the 80s, and he was a guest on the Letterman show, and I've seen several of them. He was speaking the same exact thing, saying that the United States is getting taken advantage of by all these other countries that we pay money to. And people were like, I think Oprah was one and David Letterman was the other, saying, well, are you going to you're going to run for president? He's like, no, I'm not going to run for president. I'm just saying these are the problems I see. But what I liked about that, he was consistent. He's been consistent for years, feeling the exact same way. He didn't just come on the scene and go, oh, I want to run for president and start making stuff up. And I thought that was I wanted to share that with everybody who didn't see that.
Yeah, well, of late I've seen some things like that, and I agree with you as far as it relates to his warnings about China and some of the other issues that we've been experiencing. You're right. Ever since I saw an interview that was from 1980 that he did with Rona Barrett. I don't know if you remember her or not.
Yeah, sheesh.
But he was saying, like you said, he was saying pretty much the same things then. It was an interview with Oprah,
Yeah.
ironically, and she was asking if he was going to run and this, that, and the other. And yeah, I agree. He was making the same arguments as it relates to how we are being treated by friend and foe alike.
Yeah.
So, the man, I am convinced the man loves the country. I don't know that if I was a billionaire, I'd put up with all the stuff that he and his family
I know.
have put up with. But anyway, we just need to continue to pray for him. Vice President Pence, who, by the way, also came to Dalton, Georgia last week, I think after our program that night, and Beth and I, the kids went, and Allison got to shake hands with the vice president, who spoke to her
Nice.
very briefly. So now she's all pumped about getting involved with things.
Well,
So,
hopefully she didn't wash her hand after that. That she could just never wash her hand.
well, she said she was never going to wash it, but then we went to lunch and I told her, you have to, so
Dad has to always.
yeah. Now, a couple people are making mention of, and I think we should too. Did you see the video from last night about the lady and how Trump pauses?
Yeah, I was watching the whole rally last night. I watched all three, of course, and this elderly lady, I guess, collapsed in the audience. He paused everything, which he always does if somebody collapses, and he calls for the doctor. And he said, "Take your time, take your time." It was about a 10-minute break, and as people were standing there, somebody in the crowd said, "Let's pray." And somebody broke out with Amazing Grace. And he was, the president was, kind of moving to the music. And they, were saying something about God. And he said something about God. It was wonderful to see. I don't think I've ever seen a rally, a political rally like that, where somebody broke out in song with Amazing Grace ever.
I don't recall that either. It's pretty. Well, I don't even know what the word is I'm looking for here. It's out of the ordinary for certain, and it just kind of gives you hope that maybe God hasn't given up on this nation. You know, maybe He still yet has something He wants this nation to do, and that's why these things are going on. We still have our part to do, and so everybody's listening. Hopefully, you've already voted, and I saw something earlier today. I think it was Andrew Wilkow. He says, everybody's saying, get out and vote, get out and vote. And he says, but only if you know how our government works and you know what the Constitution says, and you have some sense of what's going on. And I thought about that. I'm like, he's absolutely right. Only the people who actually know how this thing works should be out there voting. And I guess I'm inferring something here that certain groups of people don't know what the heck's going on. But anyway.
Yeah, we'd have about 2 people at every voting place. That's for sure. Because a lot of people don't even know the 3 branches of government. So, that Garrett said that they were having church there at that rally. Jonathan said, I vote for Yeshua to come back, rule the nations with a rod of iron. Jean said, I so pray that Adonai will have mercy on us again, even though we don't deserve it. I look at it as it's a reprieve that God has given us, and hopefully that God will give us a reprieve today and in 2020 at least.
Well, some folks and I were talking about these things over the weekend when I was speaking at this congregation. And as a believer, you do have to kind of balance things out. Ultimately, the Messiah is going to rule and reign, and that's what we're all anticipating. But like Darlene just mentioned here, a good portion of His bride is still here. And not only that, our mission is to reach the world, because the Creator is still concerned about all of these lost people out here, even the Antifas, even the folks that we don't particularly like, politically speaking anyway. It says, for God so loved the world. And so maybe it's that He's not ready to give up on them either. And so He's going to give us opportunity once again to do what we're supposed to be doing, not to have more toys and those kinds of things, but to have the opportunity to reach those who need to hear, the gospel of the kingdom. And because ultimately it's about His purposes. And so, in discussing these things, we were talking about God intervenes in the affairs of men, but men still have the responsibility to go out and take advantage of, if you will, the opportunity that He's given us. And if you don't mind, I'm going to relate a real quick story from history. All right. In the opening days of the Revolution, this is actually in July of 1776, about the time the Declaration was signed and then first declared, George Washington and the Continental Army were in what was called Brooklyn Heights. It was on the extreme western part of Long Island. Pardon me. And the British had basically cornered him and the army there against their backs are to the East River, and the British regulars in front of them. They're cut off, and basically it's just a matter of time. And the Continental Army is probably going to be defeated, and the revolution is over before it gets started good. But about that time, and I'm kind of boiling this all down, about the time the British were going to mount an attack to finish this off, it is recorded that a dense fog, began to settle in on both encampments so that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Not only that, but the British warships were coming up the East River could not, because there was a contrary wind blowing downriver that kept them from coming up and cutting off Washington and his retreat route. So when Washington realized that they had had a reprieve, then he took action. And it just so happened that there were fishermen there who were in the army from Gloucester and Marblehead and all these places along the northeast coast. They rounded up a bunch of boats. Everybody made it across to Manhattan while this fog is still settled. George Washington's on one of the last boats to leave. And as the last man is leaving, the fog lifts. The British run into the encampment to find nobody there. All of that is to say, that happened. That's not a fantasy. That's not a fairy tale. That happened in American history. And so from our beginning, the Creator has intervened on our behalf, even though we have never deserved it.
Yep.
In order to serve his purposes. And if he has intervened once again and a contrary wind is blowing against those warships, and if a fog has settled over the camp of the enemy, it's still our responsibility to take advantage of this door of opportunity that he gives us. And so I feel that, and I hope and I pray that every person who understands the unique history and nature of this country and unique mission of this country, until the Messiah returns, we need to do everything we can to make sure that a light is still burning here that reaches the peoples of the world, not just with the message of liberty and freedom, but the liberty that the Spirit of the Lord gives, the liberty of being delivered from the bondages of our sin and our past and all these things. So anyway, I got a little preachy, but I feel like that's what's going on here.
Yeah, and I hope that, that we did well in God's eyes, meaning that, when he gave us a reprieve in 2016, that we did well and we made good use of our time and we did what we were supposed to do with that reprieve. And so that he will grant us, that reprieve again today, that we get that. Now, Teresa said, my voting place today is at a church, small town feel, love it. I've never heard of a voting place in a church. I think that's really unusual. It's kind of certainly is different, about that, but it's pretty cool. Anne said, "Preach it, Bill."
And she's
Dawn,
British.
And Dawn said, "Yes, amen, Bill." Yeah, I think that I think some people are starting to learn that politics is just a way to gauge what's going on. It's not the important thing. That there's more, we're just looking at politics as where is society going, maybe some signs of what we're supposed to do as Christians. But it's we need to continue on and do more and more. And more means, I think, saving the republic, saving people to Christ. And that's what we need to do from here on, regardless of what happens. Now, Ronnie says in Indiana has them in churches all the time. In California, the closest thing they get to a church is a garage that they have them in, just so you know.
Yeah, well, that's California. The rest of the country is different. So.
Yes, that's true. And now Carla said my voting place is also at a church in Palestine, Texas. Hopefully Texas is going to get it straight today and get Cruz. I'm telling you, if they vote Beto in Texas, you are California now. If that happens, there's no hope for Texas. I mean, I can't even imagine Texas doing it. That will disappoint me beyond words.
I don't see it. I don't see it.
No, and Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, I mean,
she's going to win.
we're looking for this red tsunami today.
Tennessee is not going to Memphis, Shelby County, and Davidson County, which is Nashville. Yeah, they'll vote for Phil Bredesen. But the rest of Tennessee, I'm telling you, they're not going to do it. It's not going to happen.
Good. It's the way it should be. One of the things that in California, of course, we have Maxine Waters, and you can hear President Trump, talking about her all the time. And Garrett said, I hope the Democrats get the memo. They vote tomorrow.
Right.
Uh, but with Maxine Waters, her opponent is Omar Navarro. And as again I've said before, we take the top two vote getters in California, and so the one closest to her was Omar Navarro. He was the second highest vote getter. The bad news is for I think for Omar is she got in the primary something like 78% to his 14%. So you can see there's a huge gap that he would have had to have made up between the primaries and the midterm. And I doubt very seriously he would be able to make it up. Plus, she's like a Dianne Feinstein. She will die at her desk. She has been in that position for so long, over 20 some years, that the chances of her getting voted out are like slim to none.
Well, we do what we can do. We have a cruise of oil and a small measure of meal. And we go in and we bake cakes and we think that's the end of it. We're going to get ready to die. And then we go back the next day and guess what? Somehow or another, there's still meal and there's still a cruise of oil, and we bring the fish and the loaves and the Messiah multiplies it. We do what we can do and the Creator then does what we cannot do. And that's what I feel in my heart, that we need to do what we can do, what we're supposed to do. And that is to contend for righteousness. And then we watch the Creator do what only He can do. And I think if nothing else, what we learned in 2016, and this really made a big impression on me and changed my whole way of thinking about some things. Nobody, including the Trump campaign team, thought they were really going to win on election day,
Yeah.
and then something happened. So we'll do what you can do what we should do what we can do, and then let's let the Creator do what only He can.
Linda said, I thought there was no life beyond Obama, but I regarded not my fleshly thinking. Jean said, can you imagine Mad Max in charge of a committee? No, especially the financial committee. No. I mean, here's a woman who's been up on, ethics violation charges and looking at reviews because of the amount of money she has given to her daughter to send out mailers. It's just astronomical. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But I'll tell you something. If today the Democrats take back the House, you can just almost be assured that Maxine Waters is going to start that whole impeachment process talk immediately. And I see that, it would not surprise me that the House would start towards impeachment. Now, people have said, but there's nothing to impeach him by. Absolutely, there's nothing to impeach him by. We know that. But how that has never stopped the Democrats from doing anything, to bring it up, even just to have that going on. If you start it now, and you start the investigation, and the whole process for an impeachment, it'll go right up to 2020. And I know what they want to do is see him at least in the House that he's impeached, so that they could say in 2020, you don't want to vote for him. He was impeached. I mean, I know that's what they want to do. And then Adam Schiff from California has said that if the Democrats gain control, that they're going to make sure that this Mueller investigation into Russia just keeps on rolling.
Well, there are certain things that are out of our control.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, even if they were in control of the House and they, started impeachment proceedings, and even if the House voted to impeach him, and they'd have to have a really big majority, I think, for that to really, go anywhere. But I mean, it's not going to go through the Senate. So
No.
it's all it is a talking point, like you said, to give them something to talk about in 2020. Keep that in people's mind. But however, everything they've tried so far has backfired on them.
Yep.
You think about it.
Yep.
Most everything they have tried has backfired. So we'll see what happens tonight. I'm hopeful. I want to think that if God has started something 2 years ago, I don't think He's finished yet. But my ways aren't His ways, and vice versa. So we'll just have to wait and see. I've done what I can do. You've done what you can do. Beyond that, right now, all we can do is pray that God's will and purposes be performed.
Yeah, absolutely. Dawn said, I see a miracle in the making tonight. Linda said, praise him for his intervention. Jonathan said, amen to that. Brenda Liz said, I'm still waiting for her to say on what grounds. Again, she'll make it up. Bethany says, but God. And Garrett said that the main weapon is deception against Americans, and it is not working. And hopefully that's absolutely true, that Americans have woken up and said, this is not the type of country that I want to live in with what the Democrats, and again, these are liberal left Democrats, progressives that we're talking about. I don't want to live in a world where these people are in control, because it's absolutely insane. And I did want to mention that with Bill Clinton, when he was impeached by the House, and it was the Senate who didn't allow it to go forward
Right.
because they didn't want the country to be impacted by this. And you don't impeach a sitting president. It's just not good for the country. So again, like you said, and like I mentioned before, it's just to have that to use against him in 2020.
Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if memory serves me correctly, there have only been two impeachment proceedings in American history, and both of them were acquitted in the Senate. One of them was Andrew Johnson, because he was, the one who succeeded Lincoln, and that was over politics. That was over, he was not going to impose the radical uh, agenda of the people up north that wanted to really, really punish the South. He was going to try to carry through with what Lincoln had started. And, he was impeached for that. He was acquitted in the Senate. I think it was, by like 1 or 2 votes. So here's my point. If ever there was a president who was impeached that should have been, it was that man you just mentioned, because I felt like that was legitimate. All right. So that brings me back to Trump and, the possibility that this could happen. I think most reasonable people will see that it's nothing more than they're out to get this guy. They don't like him. They're going to cook up charges. They're going to try to find something. And if it's unjust, and we're speculating now, we're talking about things that may never even occur.
Hypotheticals.
Right. I am convinced at this point that every plot and scheme that they have hatched and tried to play has backfired on them. And we'll see tonight whether or not the Kavanaugh debacle and some of their other little shenanigans is going to cost them what should have been a reasonably easy takeover of the House. I just feel that everything they're doing, it's not only exposing them, but it's backfiring and coming back on them. Again, we'll see.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, with the Kavanaugh, the report that came out from the Senate Judiciary Committee, there was absolutely nothing, and nothing again that corroborated anybody's evidence against Kavanaugh. So here you had a man whose life and career were almost ruined by people. One woman, in fact, admitted that she absolutely made everything up. She lied about living in California, sent information to Kamala Harris. Turns out she lives in Kentucky, said she just needed attention, and that's what she did.
Well, now she's about to get some, from what I understand.
She's going to get some attention. And and I hope this in the future, people look at that and they realize it's not worth it. Don't even try it. Now, Lou Eva said, yes, Bill backfires like it did for Haman and the gallows he built. And it's a huge spiritual war. We need to be on our knees, Paula said. And absolutely we do. Because even if we win today, and we win the whole thing, that we keep the House and we grow the Senate, they're not going to stop.
No,
this is not going to be like, oh, you won. We're just going to go sit down quietly now, wait for 2020.
No, this is going to continue to be a fight. If the Democrats do take the House, it's going to be gridlock. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be gridlock, and Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi and a few others flapping their jaws for the next 2 years to try to keep things in the news. And the news media is going to be more than willing to accommodate them. However, if the Republicans retain control, it's still going to be a fight. Like you said, it's still going to be a war. And I do believe it is a spiritual war. That is not to say that every Republican is a righteous person. You know, I'm hopeful that some of those people on the supposedly the conservative side will realize that there's something bigger than politics going on here, and will come to their senses as well. It's like Lindsey Graham. I don't know what happened to this guy, but he's gone from saying that Donald Trump should go to he double hockey sticks to actually adopting some of Trump's tactics and just courage, frankly, to address some of these things that's been going on and hopefully make a positive change in this nation. So maybe there'll be more that will catch on to the fact that there's something going on here. And if you got any sense at all, and I mean spiritual sense, you'll get yourself in line here.
Yeah. Now, Marlene said I would feel sorry for middle of the road Dems, but their heathen party still supports abortion. I feel sorry for the Democrats in that the ones who are still in the party, probably looking at it, a lot of them are saying, I don't recognize my party. And where do I go? And I think that's probably why a lot of Democrats have gone over to becoming an independent, because they just don't know what to do at this point. And hopefully they will be voting Republican today and not, taking the votes away from the Republican candidate by voting independent. Linda said, I believe they are trying to pick up radicals for the future. Let's see, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, just saying. Brenda Liz said McCain died. That's what happened to him. Bethany said, hope he maintains his position after tonight. And Darlene said, I think it's given the GOP some new fight. They always act defeated. That's true. And then John McCain died. That's what's up with Lindsey. He was under his thumb, Marlene said. And absolutely, that he was freed when John McCain died. And I don't know why he had to do that with John McCain for years. Maybe just loyalty to a friend. I don't know. But it was much better when he, just became his own person. So.
Well, he, like Beth said, hope he continues this way, because the president sure could use some help, in carrying this fight,
Absolutely. And I think what would be good, I don't know about how everybody else feels about this, but if tonight we are winning everything and we take the House and the Senate, I would love to see the president the next day, the next week, replace Jeff Sessions, and also have Rosenstein, resign, or whatever you want to call it. I think we need an attorney general that is going to be on the same page as the president. And while they're separate, and I get all that, they need to be somewhere on the same page, and they're just not.
Well, the attorney general serves at the pleasure of the president, right? I mean, he's the one that nominated him. He's the one that appointed him on his team.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, he has every right to ask for his resignation.
Yep, absolutely.
I kind of get the feeling, it's not some big profound consideration, but I just kind of get the feeling, Trump's just been biding his time to see what happens today, what the outcome is. And if it's, very favorable for him, then I think he's going to take some pretty significant and decisive action. And I think things will escalate at that point.
Yeah, I think so too. And we've looking at some of the races, Georgia, they're in a position they need to figure out what to do in Georgia. I mean, you've got Stacey Abrams, who, from what I've been hearing, she's about $200,000 owing in back taxes. Sounds a lot like Al Sharpton, although he has her beat by quite a bit of more money than that. She also over the weekend, I don't know if she endorsed this or if this just happened, but the Black Panthers in full, rifles and everything else were out sort of marching for Stacey Abrams. And Stacey Abrams, the background that I know about her is she was a romance novelist. And so I don't know how it came to be that now she's running for governor of Georgia. And we know that Kemp, who is the Republican running in Georgia, has already turned over to the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI information saying, hey, the voter registration system we feel it's been hacked, and we feel it's been hacked perhaps by the Democrats, and we want this looked into. And the Democrats are saying, this is just a political stunt. Nothing happened, and you know it.
Both Georgia and Florida have two people running for the Democratic ticket that it seems to me that there is a lot of smoke that, when there's smoke, there's fire usually. And there's been a lot of smoke around Abrams' campaign, Gilliam's campaign. When you go to Atlanta, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully here, but Atlanta is another Georgia. Anybody that lives in Georgia, I believe, would tell you that. I think Beth's on here, and she would probably testify to that. Atlanta is a different Georgia. It's a lot different than, Macon or North Georgia, Southwest Georgia, where Beth and I grew up. And so, you very much could. It would be nothing for me to go down to Atlanta and see the Black Panthers out in force and using intimidation, and would get away with it most likely. My hope is that the folks that are in counties outside of Cobb and Fulton and others will overcompensate for all of that. So we shall see.
Beth said she owes the IRS over $50,000, has over $170,000 in credit card debt, other debt as well. Yes, armed Black Panthers for Abrams. It stinks to high heaven of Democrat corruption. Stacey Abrams wants to change America, Teresa said. We've heard that before, and look what happened under Obama. Just like Austin is another Texas, Linda said. Beth said, yep, Atlanta is not true Georgia, now full of Hollywooders, and now worse than it was. Remember when the celebrities all went down to Georgia before? That didn't work out so well. People in Georgia, too, they don't want to see the celebrities from Hollywood coming in there because they don't value them like people in, I guess, some places. I mean, I don't think people in even California value them that much. Rachel said, sure is, hasn't been the same since the Yankees came through and burned it. It's a different country. Let's see. Some other people said down here. Dawn said she's talking about Stacey Abrams. She's a buddy of Hillary's. So she's going to pull a Hillary ploy hacking in the voting system. And, that's pretty amazing to watch that. And it's amazing where these people just come out of nowhere.
I'm sorry. Gene's comment right there.
Too many D Yankees in hot Atlanta.
Okay. Well, just to be fair, we probably have Yankees that are watching us right now. So not all Yankees are bad. But anyway, it's a Georgia. It's a Southern thing.
Hot Atlanta. Yeah, and Bethany said, and I didn't hear this, and this wouldn't surprise me because I know Oprah was campaigning for Abrams, but Oprah cried for lynchings in Georgia to stop while campaigning for her. I mean, really, Oprah?
I think the whole thing with Georgia and Texas with what's his name, Beto, whatever the heck is, O'Rourke.
It's even hard to say.
and in Florida as well. I mean, you've got all this outside money coming in. These people who live in different worlds than most people in these states live in. They're trying to buy, the future. They're trying to buy these elections and set the pace for the future, and turn Texas, Georgia, Florida, what have you, and anyone else they can into California, into New York, into Illinois. And again, this is what we're up against. It's beyond politics. It's right and wrong. It's good and evil. It's righteousness, I hope, and as opposed to godlessness. And that's why I'm hopeful that the Creator is not done, and he still has something he wishes to do with this country. He's calling upon all of us to do our part. And first and foremost, as someone has already said, that begins on our knees before we ever go to the ballot box. And after we go to the ballot box, because it's not done yet. It's not over once you leave that ballot box. We need to pray. We need to earnestly pray that God's will, whatever that is, comes out of this. And whatever his will is, we need to be willing and able to go forward, because not only do we think it's God's will when it turns out the way we'd like for it to be. Sometimes it's God's will when it doesn't. Now, I'm not saying I want the other side to win. We just have to be prepared to go forward regardless of what happens tonight, because we're in a spiritual war. The battle isn't over yet.
Yeah, and God is in control. And if you've done your part, I mean, it's God already knows the outcome from tonight. So, what we have to do is whatever that is, we take it and go. Now, Beth said like their track record in Cali is so sterling and economically sound. Dawn said they're always bringing back the slave days when it benefits them. I mean, for Oprah to say that, that's a low, cheap shot. That, and as Bethany said, it's
just
emotional manipulation.
Yeah, it is. It's a manipulation, and as Gene said, there are Yankees and there are the Yankees. There's a
Yes,
difference.
there are. And then Jonathan was saying, why are we tolerating this nonsense the left is doing? Good question. And Jonathan, I think part of it is as Republicans, we are always retroactive, reactive, I should say, rather than proactive. We need to change that. We need to stop sitting at home and waiting for elections in order to get our message out, in order to change the country and the culture, back to where it was and maybe even better than it was. We can't wait for elections to do that, and I think
Yeah.
it hurts us every time.
Well, if you liken the situations of two opposing armies, we've been basically sitting around in our forts and encampments, wherever whatever our duty station is, just biding time,
Yes.
while the other has been working very hard. Their campaign is to make inroads, to advance against us, to flank us, to try to get us to surrender. And they've been very, very successful in that. And so God's people, again, beyond the politics of it, God's people are likened into an army. And an army, in a word, is supposed to do one thing, and that is fight. And as we fight, we're supposed to take ground away from the enemy. It shouldn't be that conservative / biblical virtues and principles are always on the defense. It should be that radical, godless issues and positions are on the defense, because the Messiah said to his people, and this is, pertains to his agenda, the kingdom, the gospel, not politics. But if we are fighting for righteousness and we're contending for the kingdom of heaven and we're standing on what is true, he says the gates of hell won't be able to stand against it. So that's the way it should be. So you're absolutely right, and Jonathan's right. We should be more aggressive, not just politically, but
Right.
more importantly, we should be more aggressive spiritually. We should be on the march. We should be, well, I don't want these rallies is awakened to me the reality that if people would rally around the Messiah and the gospel and the kingdom the way they're rallying around Trump, and maybe that's playing a role in it, okay? But if we would rally around those kinds of things, those people on the left, the godless, the Antifa, the progressives, the communists, they would be reeling right now. And that's just the way it is.
It's true, and I'll tell you something though. On the other hand, I think that for a lot of people who were, let's just say, maybe the Sunday Christians, or the Christians that have been participating very often, reading their Bible, I honestly think the movement that has happened in America because of Donald Trump and because of God, ultimately, is bringing people back to God and increasing their faith more than before. And I think that Donald Trump has helped do that.
Well, and that's why I said, maybe that is playing a role in the overall and ultimate
Exactly.
objective here.
Yeah.
And if that is so, and I don't argue against that. If that's so, then look who he's using. He's using a man that is really rough around the edges, like we've talked about. He's no better, no worse than most people. He's got his flaws, and a lot of his flaws, some believers found very abrasive and intolerable. and yet God's using him. So if God can use him, and he's demonstrating, if we fight, if we display courage, if we don't take a defeatist attitude, then yeah, we can make a difference. And so if believers would grab onto that I can do all things through the Messiah who strengthens me, not just put it here, but let it be here, and then let it have legs and hands that actually get out and do something. If I really embrace the words that God told the people of Israel through Moses, where their enemies were concerned, don't be afraid of them, don't be dismayed, don't be discouraged. I, the Lord your God, I go before you, I fight the battle for you. If we would embrace the heart of David, who looked across the field and saw an uncircumcised Philistine, knowing that the Philistine had no covering, had no protection from God, he says, you know what? I don't have to wear Saul's armor. Give me my stick, give me my rod, give me my bag, and give me my sling. I'll go out and fight this guy. That's what we need in God's people today. We need that willingness to fight. And I agree with you. In a way, he is using Donald Trump to teach us that in some measure.
Yeah, and I think it's helping us to become more proactive type people rather than reactive, because he's showing people what can be done when you get out there, get off your butts and actually do something. I mean, here's
Right.
this 72-year-old man that has had what, 3 rallies in one day, and how many in the last 53 rallies in 20 some days. I mean, it's crazy. The guy sleeps for 2 hours a day and does what he does. I don't know how he does it, and he's
I don't
successful.
either. I don't either. I'm about to fall asleep now.
But you have an excuse, and it's like Marlene said, don't be wimps. And see, Bethany said Patton was tough too. But again, Donald Trump, we're no different than Donald Trump. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes. We all can be used by God. And and that's what he's doing. He just happens to, I think God was preparing Donald Trump years and years ago, back in the 80s, when he didn't even know he was being prepared for this day.
I have come to believe that. I didn't see that at first, but I have come to believe that. Which then let's apply that to us.
Yeah,
And as individuals and as a group of people, God's been preparing us too,
that's
and
right.
we didn't realize it.
Yeah,
And perhaps he's been preparing us for this very moment. We've come into the kingdom for such a time as this. And again, I want to be clear on this. I don't want this to come across as Republican versus Democrat, conservative against liberal. It should be right and wrong, good and evil, righteousness opposing godlessness. And that, doesn't break down into R's and D's, So that's what we need to be looking at this as. And I am convinced that we have been given an opportunity to demonstrate to the Creator whether or not we're willing to fight for righteousness and what's right and common sense, and do what needs to be done. And this thing with Trump, this is a phenomena. I heard Rush talking about well, you watched it, you heard what he said, but he was just talking about, this doesn't happen. This is the only place this happened. And everybody else in the establishment's wanting to get in on it, but they can't do it because they don't get what's going on here. And so
mm-hmm.
that tells me it's beyond a man, it's beyond the politics. It's something spiritual going on. And I pray, I hope, I'm trusting that it is a spiritual awakening.
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think, you can see how hard people on the left fight against what's going on. And they even take things that you and I, we hear what Donald Trump is saying, and we hear him say ABC. They hear the same thing, and they hear him saying DCF. I mean, they don't get it. I mean, and it's the same words being said, but they're hearing a totally different thing. And some of the freakiest things that you think are just so obvious, they're hearing something different. Now that tells me people have different experiences, they see things differently, all that other stuff that we know about. But I also think it's also spiritual. That
Well, Beth was telling me a story when they were in line the other day. There was some protesters there, and there was this young lady that was had something going on with her phone. She was protesting. And so there was this man who was in line to get in the rally, went across to talk to her very civilly, you know, and basically, why do you so despise the man? What is it? Well, he's this, he's that. Well, how do you know he's that? Well, that's what they say on the news.
Yeah.
And he invited her. He said, look, come, I'll let you get in front of me in line and you can go in. I'll get you a hat. You just sit in there, behave yourself, and just listen to what he has to say. And she wouldn't do it. She packed up and left because they don't get it. They don't want to listen. So, and that's hard-heartedness, and that is a spiritual condition. And that's why we need a spiritual renewal.
Yeah, it's a shame when you hear that because those same people that like the man on the street, they'll do that in California, and they'll say something that Hillary Clinton said. They'll say that Donald Trump said it instead, and when the people hear it, they're like, "Oh, that Donald Trump, he's so horrible." And they say, "Well, Hillary Clinton really said that." They're like, "Really?" Because they've never even heard it. They don't listen. They don't go and do their own research, and they just listen to what mainstream media has to say to them. Margot said he was genuinely nice to her, but she chose to hate.
Beth, just talking about what I was just relating to you, that the man was just very nice to her, but she just,
Yeah.
she didn't want anything to do with it.
She didn't want, and I think also sounds like my sister I was telling you earlier, Susan Ann said. It sounds to me also like people on the left. I honestly think they want to be in a group that is doing something, right? They want to be accepted. A lot of people are trying to find acceptance and they will join in any group. They won't go research it or anything else, but they want to be involved. And the left, in some instances, unless you're doing something against what they believe, they will accept you hook, line, and sinker. They won't ask any questions. They will treat you like royalty. Now, change and try to walk away, and you'll find a different left. But I think a lot of people, that's why they don't want to go and read. They don't want to know the truth because they want to be in this group and feel that acceptance.
Well, what you just described to me was a cult.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
That's exactly what it is. Paula said, we need to pray for our teens and young adults. There is a strong army out there on the front lines. There are a lot of people who are trying to take them away from a lot of things. And the young people, unfortunately, a lot of them are falling for it. And, Alan said that the protesters chanted love, not hate, but no conservatives are throwing urine filled bottles at people. So true, Alan. That's true. And again, you wouldn't get a urine filled bottle thrown at you if you would just simply conform and believe what the liberal Democrats wanted you to believe. Thank God there are people who say, you know what, I'll take the urine and have my own open mind and my own opinion. Linda said it's called tolerance. Yeah, that's what they call tolerance, but they have no tolerance. It's like the comedian who made fun of Crenshaw, the Navy ex-Navy SEAL down in Texas, who's running as a Republican, has a patch over his eye, and that the SNL, I think his name was Pete Davidson or whatever, making fun of him for having that patch over his eye when he lost it in fighting for this country and that guy's freedoms. Oh.
well, his skinny jeans have cut off blood flow, I guess.
Well, he could probably use that as an excuse. I'm not sure he ever had a brain to think much about, but
Hey, since Alan chimed in here, did I tell you everybody that Alan received a letter from the President of the United States?
No.
He wrote a letter to Trump back in February, and here a couple of weeks ago, an envelope arrived with Alan's name on it, and inside he got a personalized letter from Donald J. Trump.
Wow. I hope you have that framed, Alan, and they will stay framed forever. You can show your grandkids what the best president we've had in America to date. And I loved Reagan. He was my first pick until Donald Trump came along. We are all out of time. This hour just goes so quickly. Want to thank everybody for being here. Please get out and vote. And if you know somebody who hasn't gone and voted, please get them out to vote. And some people still have not registered to vote. Get them to register now for 2020 and tell them how important it is to save our republic, save our country, save Judeo-Christian values. Thank you again. Please share the program. Until next time, God bless you. Take care. We'll see you again next week.